Hello everyone, and welcome to NSTA web seminars, where you can find live interactive learning at your desktop. My name is Dorothy Jeanette, and I will be moderating today's program. Today's seminar is titled, How to Prepare a Manuscript for Submission to ScienceScope. Our presenters are Patty McGinnis and Ken Roberts. Welcome, Patty.
Thank you, Dorothy. Good to be here.
Hello, everyone. This is Ken.
So I see we're on the introduction slide. So I'm Patty, and I'm the field editor for ScienceScope, and I'm here to encourage you, particularly if you're a classroom teacher, to think about sharing all of your great ideas with our readers.
And my name is Ken Roberts. I'm the managing editor at ScienceScope, and Patty and I work as a team to produce the journal for NSTA's middle-level audience. In case you don't understand the different roles, Patty is a classroom teacher that has all the science expertise and handles the submission and review process for the journal and also picks the lineups. And I work at NSTA headquarters in Arlington, Virginia, and am in charge of the production of the journal, so the editing and the layouts and design of the articles.
So our presentation is called Right from the Start. So we're going to give you all of our tips to help you get published. And I want to assure you that if you're willing to work with us and work through the systems, that you're going to have a really good chance of getting published. So Dorothy, I think you're on.
We did this exercise a little earlier while we were waiting for the session to start, but
okay.
Yes. Let's go ahead and do it again, so some more people have joined us. So let's pick up the screen marking tool, the clip art, to the right of your participant panel. You'll see the clip art, and at the very bottom is an icon that I see people have got it already. Use the custom symbols, if you would, and mark your spot on the screen. If you're joining us from outside the United States, please type in the chat box where you're joining us from. Okay, so it looks like we have people from all across the United States. A nice representation tonight. Welcome, everyone. We have a poll set up for you. The poll is, what is your occupation? And the polling button is in the participants window, the fourth icon over. You'll see an A. It's a drop-down menu. So just choose the one that matches your answer. Okay, I'll close the poll and post it to the screen.
Wow, it looks like we have a nice variety of folks here with us. So hopefully you're going to all learn some great tips for getting your piece published. A lot of what this is focused on the classroom teacher and things that the classroom teacher is interested in. So those of you that are university folks, hopefully you have some classrooms that you can get into and share the work that's going on in those classrooms. So there's another, our next poll is, have you ever written for an NSTA journal? So as you may or may not be aware, there's actually 5 NSTA journals, 4 print journals and 1 online journal. So if you've written for a journal, if you could say yes. If not, then go ahead and click no.
Okay, everyone, so we are doing a poll again. If you could click the check mark if yes, and the red X is no. We just want to do a quick poll on who's written for an NSTA journal. Okay, I'll close the poll and post it to the board for us.
So it looks like we have a lot of people that have written before. So that hopefully you'll pick up some new tips. And those of you that have not written, hopefully you'll get a lot of new tips. And there's some people didn't participate, which is perfectly okay. There will be some opportunity throughout this session tonight for you to ask questions. So make sure you're typing them in the chat, because we will be fielding questions later. Okay, just give you a little brief overview of ScienceScope. So ScienceScope is a practitioner's journal. So it's really a journal for those people that are teaching middle school kids, but it is used by other individuals as well. So in addition to middle school teachers, professors of pre-service teachers also use the journal. We have 9 issues that are published annually. And the journal's focus is to contain classroom activities, and it has a variety of columns, all of which feature things that are happening in the middle school classroom.
Okay, we have the poll set up for you. So your question is, how often do you read ScienceScope? And please select the answer, A, B, C, or D. Okay, I'll post the results to the whiteboard. One moment.
So it looks like everyone here seems to be familiar with the magazine, which is exciting for Ken and I to know that people are reading it. So now that since most of you are familiar with ScienceScope, you're probably familiar somewhat with the tone of the articles and what typically the articles contain. So we're going to go over some of that in detail tonight. So Ken, would you like to talk a little bit about what we're looking for?
Sure, and what we are looking for are authentic classroom experiences, things that have been tested in the classroom, things that demonstrate that these are actual activities that you've tested with your students. So you're including a little anecdotal material about how the students reacted. Things that show that this is not just some idea someone came up with and typed up, but someone who's able to share, successes as well as the failures of what went wrong. What kind of equipment did you need? What kind of classroom management? That's often overlooked. But how long did it take you to clean up? And what special materials did you need? And how did you assess the activity afterwards? And what safety precautions? All these things are elements that let the reader know that you are an actual classroom teacher. They share your profession, and again, that it's an authentic idea that has been vetted by you as a classroom teacher, and you're sharing it with your colleagues. Things we aren't looking for, except in rare instances, we don't want to publish anything that's already been printed elsewhere, whether it be I don't know, a district newsletter or another journal or in some other form of a blog. But if it is something that you published in another form, but have changed it enough so that that we can point to original aspects of it, then we'd be happy to consider it. Research papers, folks' dissertations, unoriginal material or material that does not provide a unique twist to a classic activity. We know that people aren't reinventing the wheel here. So if you do have something that's that you know is a classic, tried and true activity, if you come up with a way that adds a unique twist that makes it your own, then we'd love to see that. In fact, we have a column called Classic Lessons 2.0 that's dedicated exactly to those types of activities. We're not looking for opinion pieces, travelogues, diaries, writing assignments. We get a number of rushes of submissions when a classroom pre-service teacher will assign to the class the job of submitting a manuscript and bringing in the little letter or email that they get back saying that you have successfully submitted a manuscript to the journal. And we're not looking for that, but we get a lot of sort of manuscripts that come in all at once, and all they really want is to get some kind of letter of confirmation that they can share with the professor to show that they did their homework. Manuscripts that promote a commercial product, we're not really looking for. Things that talk about one specific commercial product. If you do have a great idea that focuses on a particular piece of technology, then we encourage you to try to find other products out there that can be used, just so it doesn't come across as an infomercial. Though we do realize that some things out there are hard to replace. If you have an article based on silly putty, for example, you might know how to make your own, but we will work with you on that. But we don't want to hear about a very specific piece of software or a feature of a particular microscope or something that is going to make it sound like we're a commercial. So here are some basic author guidelines. 2,000 words, have an abstract ready, double space. There's no extra points for special fonts that are going to make it difficult for us to read. There's a link here to the guidelines in more detail, but if you don't want to write this down, you can also just go to the NSTA website and type in manuscript guidelines or author guidelines, and you'll get a link to the journal you want to find out more about. The types of manuscripts that we're looking for, each issue is organized around a theme, and you're more than welcome to submit a theme-based manuscript, but we're also looking for general manuscripts. We try to provide a balance of topics that cover as many subject areas as possible, so that if you are a biology teacher and we happen to be focusing on a life science or physical science topic, that there still be something in that issue for you. So what's nice about writing to a theme is that if you're accepted for that issue, then you have a good idea of when you'll be published. General interest manuscripts, when they're accepted, they sort of go in a queue, and when Patty's trying to make a lineup, she looks at all the general interest manuscripts, and when she's trying to create a balance of different topic areas, she'll see what's available and pick them. But that can be a little longer wait than if you submit something for the upcoming February 2018 issue. Then if it's accepted, then you'll get published a little earlier than a general interest manuscript. To see what our upcoming themes are, you can go to our call for papers. It's published online. And again, if you go to NSTA.org and click on middle school, you'll find links to manuscript guidelines as well as our call for papers. And we try our best to publish that call for papers in the print edition of the journal as well. So you can find that information in almost every issue of Science Scope. In addition to feature articles, we also have a number of columns dedicated to specific topics that we encourage you to write to. Integrating technology is pretty self-explanatory. Science on a shoestring is low-budget science. Commentaries on particular topics of interest to middle-level science educators. Classic lessons I mentioned earlier. That one is about the sort of tried and true activities that you've got your own twist to make it different than the standard lesson. Teacher's Toolkit are classroom management or assessment or other tools of the classroom that you might want to talk about. And Making in the Middle is a new column that we haven't actually had we haven't published one yet. We're still building up the stockpile there, but that's going to deal with the maker movement in the classroom and tying in STEM with the maker movement. So there's many opportunities for you to either submit a general submission article or to one of these specific columns. A little bit later, we'll be getting to Manuscript Central, which is our online submission and review tool, and we'll explain how, when you're submitting the manuscript, that you can click one of these categories. But even if you're unsure where your manuscript might fit, you can just submit it as a general submission, and Patty will then decide if it might be more appropriate for a specific column or department or a theme or even one of the other journals. If she thinks it'd be a better fit for the elementary classroom or the high school classroom, then she has the option of forwarding it to that journal. Take a break here for another poll.
Hello everyone, this is Dorothy Jeanette. We'll be doing another poll. It's where are you in the process, and there are 4 choices. Please select the letter of your choice. The polling tool is in the participants window. It's the 4th icon over. It says A, and then make your choice. Okay, I'll be closing the poll and publishing the results. Ken, did you want to comment on the results?
No one has started writing. All right, well, I guess that's why you're here, so we can encourage you to get those submissions in. But I see most people here are either have an idea or just starting to gather information on the submission process. So let's see. For getting started, one of the best things you can do is to read Science Scope and get an idea of the tone of the journal. We really encourage it to be sort of conversational, as if you're speaking to a colleague, and it's not a formal academic journal, so you don't have to worry about that scholarly style. You're really just sharing everything that you know that a classroom teacher needs in order to successfully reproduce your activity. Again, we talked about some guidelines here that you can access from the NSTA website, but you can get an idea from reading the journal whether or not your manuscript is a good fit for Science Scope. And again, we talked about some of the things that are inappropriate and the types of things we're looking for, but we encourage you to get started here by just taking a look at a recent issue or going online and reading some of the free articles that are available to everyone, even if you're not a member. And some of these things that we're talking about here in writing the introduction there are probably things you covered in Freshman English Composition 101, but they still apply. What we hear from the readers is that there are a lot of things competing for their time, including the contents of the journal. So if they've only got 15 or 20 minutes to devote to one article in the journal, you're trying to grab that reader's attention and provide them with the information they need to sort of make a snap judgment about whether or not this is appropriate for their classroom and is going to be useful to them as an activity. So, you know, instead of starting the article with, you know, a recent research survey indicates that blah, it's why not start with an anecdote about how your students reacted to this experiment? What were they saying as they were doing the activity? What was engaging them? So start with a quote from one of the students, or even starting with a success or a failure story, or what prompted you to start this? What frustrating thing happened that made you think, I need a better way of explaining this, and sort of getting into why you chose to create this activity. Anything that the people reading it can relate to, saying, gee, I'm in that same situation, I'm having that same problem. If they see that in the opening paragraph, then it saves them time and draws them right in if they can relate to your situation. So save the research and details for later. There's plenty of time to provide that and support, and we are interested in seeing research-based articles. But again, you're competing for these readers' time, and you want to draw them in that opening. Again, here are some things that are covered in that Composition 101 class, but what gave you the idea of the article? What sort of planning was involved? How did you introduce it to the students? Step by step, how did you move them through the activity, especially if there are different, if it's a series of activities linked together. Finishing up with, how did you assess it? Or is it assessment that took place prior or during the activity? Where did that all fit in? Overall timeline as far as how many class periods do you devote to them, and how long are your class periods? They're not all the same, so we need to know what the reader is committing to by considering this article or this activity. Again, student actions and reactions. It makes it real for the teachers, or for the readers, to hear what these kids are saying when they undertake this this activity, and how they're reacting to your instruction. And again, don't forget classroom management. We want to know what pitfalls to look out for, how long it's going to take to clean up, where what are you providing as far as materials go, and again, the very practical things that the reader is going to need to be successful when attempting the activity. Wrapping it up, writing a conclusion that's telling you about what are your learning outcomes. Are they what you expected, or did something completely different happen? What would you do differently? Again, it doesn't need to be everything you share be a success story. You can, the readers are going to learn from your mistakes and your failures as much as your successes. So please don't be embarrassed to include things that will help others avoid problems when attempting the activity. Ideas for extensions, and those can be for various ESL communities or students with different learning challenges, but also for the gifted and talented crowd. How do you push them? Or just for those kids who are fast learners, and you want to give them some options while they're waiting for the other kids to finish up. What could they do? Go back and repeat the experiment but change a variable. So and just let us know what you learned from the experience. And again, these are things that you learned in a basic writing class, but they still hold true to this type of article.
Okay,
so
we're ready for
the next poll here. Yep.
Yes, we're ready for another poll. This poll is about how are you feeling about the writing process at this point. There's 3 choices. Please use the polling button, which is the 4th one over in the participants window. It says A. You have A, B, C as your choices. Okay, I'll give you another 30 seconds to mark in your response. Please do mark in your polling response, and then I'll publish the poll.
All right, looks like I'm the only one who's confident, but that's all right. We'll hopefully by the end of this we will convince you that we are going to do everything in our power to get you published and help you work through this process.
Okay, so Ken sort of walked you through the basics of the manuscript, the introduction, the main body, and the conclusion. But of course, when you look at ScienceScope, it's much more than the text. So as they say, a picture is 1,000 words. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about those supplemental files that kind of make the manuscript. They're kind of those eye-grabbing things that make you want to go ahead then and read the text. So here's a clip from one of, I think it was October issue. So when you look at the journal, it sometimes can be a little intimidating because they have this beautiful layout, there's colors, everything looks gorgeous. You just have to submit the Word document. And then any other files are submitted as additional files. So what the staff does, we have a very talented design staff, and they take all of that raw work and they turn it into this beautiful layout. And as Ken mentioned, we're here to encourage you to write. We also have an editorial staff that actually will take your written document and kind of tweak it and work with the writing with you. So you don't have to be the world's best writer. I mean, you have to be able to convey your ideas, to the reader, but you don't have to be the best writer. NSTA is a very talented writing staff, and as you can see, design staff as well. One thing I want to point out on this page is we added this sidebar for the majority of the articles to kind of summarize the article in a very quick, the reader can just look it over very quickly and decide if this is something that applies to them. So, think about the content area, what grade level is this addressed for, what's your big idea, what's the pre-essential knowledge that students would have to have before they do the activity, how much time is required, the cost, and of course safety. Because those are all big things that a teacher would need to know if they're going to replicate your work. So if you don't have it laid out in a little sidebar, that's fine. When your manuscript goes under final edits, the editorial staff will work with you to put all of that in. But those are pieces that, of course, you would have to include. So if you can include as much as possible up front, then you're going to have fewer revisions. So we're going to give you the tips on exactly what to include. So supplemental materials. So those tables, charts. If you happen to have a ScienceScope, you could be looking at all that art type stuff. The non-text things are the things I'm talking about. So any tables, charts, photographs, graphs, anything, rubrics, things like that supplement and kind of tell the story of your manuscript. Those are things that would need to be published. So we have limited room, so please only include those that are necessary for the clarity of the manuscript. So things that have to be there to explain what your idea is would be printed. Things that are kind of like nice to have but not essential, those belong to another place online, and then the reader can go ahead and download those. So I always like to get, as a classroom teacher, I like to have worksheets, assessment guides, rubrics, all those types of things submitted as a Word document so that I can just click on them and download them. So those types of things won't always be in the manuscript, but they should be there for the teacher to download, because something that a friend of mine said, it'd be nice to have the journal as quote-unquote copy-friendly as possible, because teachers don't have a lot of time to sit there and think about, how do I make this work for me? So whatever you can do to sort of streamline it for the teacher, that would be good. All those files are uploaded separately from the manuscript. So the stuff Ken talked about, all that text, that's your Word document that gets uploaded to what we call Manuscript Central, and then all those separate files, other files, get uploaded separately. And then what Manuscript Central does is kind of pieces it all together in one big PDF. I sometimes get manuscripts with the figures and that kind of thing embedded in there. They shouldn't be. They should be separate. It's not horrible if you go ahead and put them in there, but it's better if they're separate. Anything that you upload as a separate file should be somehow mentioned in the text so that we know where it goes, that it has a place. And then your figure should have a title, not, figure 1, figure 2, figure 3, or if you want to give them another title, that's fine. Figure 1, 2, 3 that works. It's great. Label all parts of your figure. So if you've got graphs, things like that, make sure that the axes are labeled. If they're color-coded, make sure that chart, you've got a chart there, a key for that, points on a map, so that it's easy for the reader to understand. And then occasionally you might need to submit something that you've used from another source. So a worksheet. I know that we've printed a lot of Paige Keeley's assessment probes. Those have been very popular, that have supported different things teachers have done in the classroom. So anything like that, you would need permission for reprinted material before submitting. Now, if it's something like coming from Paige, and she works with NSTA, that's not going to be an issue. But if you're looking at something that's coming from, say, FOSS or something like that, you would need permission in order for us to reprint those. And my hope is you're not just, taking a FOSS kit and showing what you did with it. It should be obviously a little bit more than that. But sometimes you do need to reprint something, and of course, the burden would be on you to get that copyright. Materials. So cost and quantity. This is a big one. So people in the manuscripts will just say, I used popsicle sticks and modeling clay and whatever. I like to know how much I need for a class of 30, because I teach in a district where the classes are somewhere between 28 and 31. So how much do I need for a class that size? And then, and I'm going to come back, if you just sort of say, here's what, list the materials, but you're not specific about it, you would be asked to go back and explain exactly the number, the size of items, and then how much the cost is. So if you're, say, using a wooden, a wooden ball, what's the size? What's the diameter? So that people could actually replicate it. So there should be no guesswork involved. What you're seeing right here is a nice little table, so it could be certainly submitted as a table. A lot of times it's submitted within the text, which I think it's a little bit hard to pull out from the text. So I personally like tables, but you don't have to put it in a table. If you're only using a couple materials, it wouldn't make sense to have a table, but if you have a whole bunch of things, then probably a table would be best. We don't like to cite specific vendors, so if there's a hard-to-find item, you can explain where you found it, but we're not here to promote a vendor. So you'll notice on, say, some of the articles that feature, say, sensors, we'll just say it was a sensor or a probe that was used, or that the activity used Pasco probes, but you can use any variety of probes. So again, we want to make sure we're staying away from endorsing a specific vendor when we're looking at materials. And I love pictures. I drive Ken crazy because I want to print everything, but I'm a visual learner, and so it's much easier for me to understand from a picture how to set up a lab than to read text. So, you know, you would obviously want to explain in the text how you're setting the lab up, but a picture really does help the reader to understand what that lab should look like. So it really does nicely convey exactly what the reader should be doing. So pictures of lab setups, pictures of equipment sometimes, if the equipment can be a little bit, if it's a little bit hard to explain what the equipment is, you could take a picture of that. So you can submit pictures. Whether or not they get printed is kind of up to me, but if it's something that's going to really add value and help the reader understand what you did, then they're probably going to be printed. Handouts. So as I mentioned earlier, I hate to use the word copy-friendly, but something that teachers are really pressed for time. So how can you take your idea and kind of condense it in a way that somebody could read it and say, wow, this is perfect. I'm going to be starting this unit next week. This would be great for that, where they don't have to do a whole lot of work. The work's already been done for them. So I've gotten a lot of great manuscripts that have included PowerPoints. Again, that type of thing is available on NSTA website because they're housed there. But PowerPoints, worksheets, quizzes, rubrics, so that really a teacher could just use all that. It just makes it much easier and more likely for somebody to use your work. So author-designed spreadsheets or worksheets, I'm sorry, not spreadsheets, worksheets are great. If you're, again, using a worksheet from another source, that would have to be something that you would need permission for. And we're not, I'm not endorsing worksheets per se, because obviously that's not what we're good science necessarily, but something like I had mentioned with Paige Keeley, where you start with an assessment probe and you go from there, that obviously has a lot of value. Answer keys. So if you're going to create something, you should also have an answer key for the teacher. And then samples of student work. So this is really important because that's something our reviewers look for, is that what is kind of the average student's response to the problems they're doing, to the lab they're doing, to the activity, so that a teacher can sit there and kind of know what to expect from their own students. And so as you're teaching, or if you're a college professor and you're going into the classrooms, what I suggest you do is take lots of pictures and document a lot of things so that maybe you don't get around to writing for another 6 months or maybe even a year, but you have all of that already there, so that if you submit and I come back and I tell you that the reviewers are asking for samples of student work, and those kids have moved on and they're now in another grade, you don't have to worry about that because you'll have everything. So make sure you're getting saving a lot of things, either by pictures or if you're saving different documents that kids have done. That just makes your life a lot easier when we're coming back and asking for edits. And photos and art. So high resolution artwork, and maybe Ken might have to jump in here. I'm not sure about, I think taking things with cell phones and iPads are okay.
They are okay as long as you have the resolution set as high as possible. When you take a picture with a cell phone, it's usually set, the resolution is usually set very low because it looks very good on screen at 72 dots per inch. But if you take that same image and try and reproduce it in print, 72 dots per inch creates a very grainy, blurry photo. So just remember, if you are using your camera to look at the settings, or if you've got an SLR or other type of digital camera, just try to set the resolution as high as possible. Typically, if you're creating a file, a JPEG or a TIFF or whatever format you are using, and the file is, I don't know, between 50 and 100 kilobytes in size, that's a low resolution image. The images that we usually, for say a 3x5 photo, is closer to 1 megabyte in size. It's fine if you want to submit smaller versions of the photos with your article, but we're always going to get back to you and say, I hope you can provide us with a higher resolution version of this image. So just keep that in mind when you're taking your pictures.
Thank you, Ken. And I can tell you that that is true because I had something printed a few years ago and the staff did come back and ask me for additional photos. So yeah, that is something to be aware of. But take lots of pictures and that way you have it later on. So what are we looking for in terms of photos? Well, those of you that have seen the journal, we're looking for students that are engaged in activities, so they really shouldn't be posing if at all possible. They should be actually doing the activity. The equipment setup that I shared earlier. The results, so if you have plants that are being grown, if you have models that students did, excuse me, things of that nature. So just take lots of pictures as you're doing the activity and then you can kind of figure out which of those things really should be submitted that will nicely supplement your manuscript. The next one is a biggie. Students need to be wearing proper safety equipment. So that means goggles. And I like to tell the teachers I work with that even when the kids are pouring water, they should be wearing goggles. So things that maybe you would do in your own kitchen at home, if you're doing them in the classroom, they have to have goggles on. So I get wonderful, wonderful pictures I would love to use, but there's no goggles. Well, the kids don't have goggles on, so we can't use the picture. There's, in terms of using or photographing students and then having them, their picture or their image appear in the journal, they either need a signed model release form from NSTA or a signed form that your district has provided. And I don't know if, Ken, did you have anything you wanted else to mention about the model release forms?
I did provide a link in the comments section over there in the chats to the one that we have, but no, I think you covered it there. The one thing about the goggles, the difference between safety glasses and chemical splash indirectly vented safety goggles is anything involving liquids. So some people think that they'll submit a photo where the kid's wearing safety glasses and we still can't use them because they're not the proper type of goggle that we need for using liquids. And we have a safety consultant who looks at everything and just he's setting a very high bar for everyone, and that's in part because of the liability that it affects us as publishers. We have to, even if it seems excessive, we're gonna set the high standard and leave it up to you to follow your own district policies. But again, we're looking to be overly cautious.
And thank you, Ken. And I can attest to that as well, that we have an excellent safety officer, and we are going to err on the side of being conservative. So even if there's something you did in class and maybe you didn't do everything that you should have done, it's going to have to be added to the manuscript. So hand washing, looking after mold spores, ticks when you're outside. So think about all those things you would want to do and address in terms of safety. And there's a safety link on the NSTA website that addresses a lot of safety that you can talk about or you can reference. So moving on. Okay, so safety equipment. So your splash-proof goggles, apron, gloves, etc. Safety precautions. I mean that's a biggie, and the reviewers do look for this. And there's the link, the safety in the science classroom link. And if you read over that, it will talk about the things you should be doing to ensure that your students are safe when you are performing different activities. And here's a picture that was in, I think it was October. And so the students are shown doing an activity, but they didn't have any goggles on, so you can see what happened there. Their lovely little faces got cut off. So it was a great picture, but we couldn't use the top half of the picture. So you want to avoid that kind of thing if at all possible. Assessment. This is another big piece, and this is one that tends to get overlooked quite a bit. So, you're familiar with formative assessment, summative assessment, rubrics and checklists. So the reviewers are going to look for assessment. So it's not going to be enough that, I sort of walked around the room and listened to student conversations. That's not going to be enough. They're going to be looking for evidence of higher learning or higher learning thinking. They're going to be looking for evidence that the students were assessed on the objectives that you had and that they met that objective. And they're going to look for evidence of that. So that's again where you would be providing student work. So examples of student work could be a student portfolio, it could be a science journal, it could be a writing sample, an exit slip, it could be a student graph, it could be a drawing. So something that kind of explains what the student was learning and how that learning was linked to the objective. So think about that as well when you're doing your activity. If it's something that you think you might want to write up, collect some of those things so that you have them for the future. I know when I did my writing before I was editor, I submitted a number of pieces. I collected everything I was, when I would think about something I might want to write up, I would collect everything, and then I would do my writing usually in the summertime when I had time. So going back to the photos, I printed out, if I had a picture that I really liked and I thought I was going to use that in my article, I would send home a NSTA model release form with the student along with a picture of the photo, and I would explain that I was planning on writing it up, and then I had all of that in a file that way. So just sort of think ahead, because it's hard during the school year a lot of times to do writing. So here's an example of some student work. So here's some student food chains this appeared again in the October issue. To give you an idea of what the author was talking about, food chains that the students were creating based on warm water and cold water, and they were looking at a mystery bird that had died along the beach. So this would give the reader then kind of an opportunity to see what a typical response would have been. And then here is a student concept map. So really it could be anything. It doesn't have to be super neat. I mean, this is student work. So it's just something that kind of provides that picture of what was happening in the classroom, and it captures what the student thinking was at the time. And again, you don't necessarily want the best student work. You know, having something that's kind of average gives you an opportunity to talk about, well, most of the students did not understand one particular concept, or they didn't get something, as is evidenced by this image. So again, you don't have to collect the best. You obviously want to collect something that's pretty readable, but collect something that's going to give you something to talk about. And then here's an example of an answer key. So the teacher had, for this activity, talked about claim evidence reasoning that the students did for their assessment, and then they provided an answer key as well. So that's also really important for teachers, because sometimes it's hard to know how they should grade something if it's the first time that they have actually done the activity. And this could be something that might be in print, or it could be something that's online. And then references. As Ken mentioned, we're not a research journal, but if you're going to cite references, and we do need to know that it's coming from a specific place, you should include references for statistics, quotes, ideas that aren't your own. If you make a statement about project-based learning is the best thing since sliced bread, where did that idea come from? And then using the author date method for citing within the text. If you take a look at some of the articles, you'll see how that's done. Listing your references alphabetically by author at the end of the article. Again, none of this is probably anything you haven't heard before. Correctly spelling all the author names and dates of publication. I just read something just this week where the reference did not match what the person had written in the text. So the author name was wrong. I don't know if it was wrong in the text or wrong in the reference, but those are things that are important, because if people want to get credit for their ideas, obviously. So then each reference cited in the text should be included in the reference list, and then each reference included in the list should be cited in the text. And then if you have any direct quotes, you should provide a page number for that. Now, all that being said, don't get super hung up on that, because as I mentioned earlier, we do have an editorial staff that if you're a little fuzzy on how to cite everything just right, they'll clean all that up. But they have to have somewhere to start. So do the best you can. I'm not sure exactly what the formatting is. It's not APA, it's something else. So just do the best you can. They will clean it up. But do make sure that you're giving credit to those people whose ideas you're using. And there's just an example of references. So another little tip, please, no more than 15 references. We're not a research journal. And sometimes I get these papers that have, like in parentheses, like 5 resources or 5 references. 1 or 2 to back up a statement is plenty. So there's the reference list, and then underneath that it says resources. So the resources would be things where teachers could go and then find out more information about the topic. And then at the very bottom it says online supplemental materials. So those materials that you submit that we didn't have room to print, that's where those would go. So think outside the box. Think about PowerPoints. Think about videos. Think about, you know, teacher guides. Whatever you have that's maybe too large or cumbersome to put in the journal, we can put it online. And of course, teachers love references and resources, so all those extra things go online. Okay, so now we're getting to the heavy hitter slide. Connecting to the NGSS three-dimensional instruction. I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I'm from Pennsylvania. We are not an NGSS adopting state. But don't let the fact that you have to tie your work to NGSS scare you if you're not an NGSS adopting state. NGSS is good science. We will help you with the connections if necessary. For those of you that may or may not know, the NGSS is made up of 3 different areas. So it's called three-dimensional teaching. So you've got your disciplinary core ideas, your science and engineering practices, and your cross-cutting concepts. And those 3 things need to be evident in your manuscript. You can't just sort of imply that they're there, you have to state them. So a lot of times you might be asking your students a specific question. That question then could be used to support that you're meeting the NGSS. So in the second bullet it says the integration cannot be implied. Each dimension must have a corresponding student task that is central to the lesson and obvious in the text. So it can't be vague, it has to be pretty specific. Again, I can help you with this if you get to the point where we're accepting the piece. For those of you that are not familiar with NGSS, it's not that difficult. It's just a matter of good teaching and connecting that teaching to the standards. Engineering pieces, as Ken mentioned, we're starting the making in the middle column, which lends itself really nicely to engineering. But according to NGSS, we should be including a science standard. So it shouldn't just be an engineering piece where students are creating something. There should be science behind it. So what is the science they're learning alongside with the engineering? So if you were to submit an engineering piece, you really should have 2 standards, one for science and then the engineering standard. And here's a sample of one of the NGSS charts. So if you look at any feature in ScienceScope, towards the back of the feature, you're going to see a chart like this. And the chart is those connections to the next generation science standards. So you're going to pick a standard that best matches your activity, and then the performance expectation that aligns with that, and then the 3 dimensions, the science and engineering practices, the disciplinary core idea, and the cross-cutting concepts will be listed. There is a downloadable blank table. There's a link to that. Ken and I just finished working up an annotated NGSS chart that will kind of walk you through how to create this. So that is going to be online in the next 3 or 4 weeks probably. And again, if you have any questions, I can kind of answer and help you with this. As somebody from a non-adopting state, I've had to learn how to read the standards. So they're a little intimidating at first, but you can certainly work on that. And somebody's saying they hear a dog barking in the background. That's because my dog is in her crate and she's not very happy, and I don't know how to get her quiet, so I apologize for that. One last look. Have someone read over your manuscript. So make sure that you have all the grammars done correctly, there's no misspelled words, that kind of thing. One thing you might want to consider is asking somebody that's not a science teacher to read your work over. Because if they can understand what you wrote, then you did a really nice job. So if you ask a science teacher to read it, they're going to read into your manuscript. So ask somebody that's not familiar with your discipline to read it over. Recheck the author guidelines. Those are all on the NSTA website. Perform a spell check. Use an easy-to-read font. Make sure that your measurements are in metrics. And then this is really important. You have to blind your manuscript. We have what's called a double-blind peer review process. So people who are reviewing your work don't know who you are, and you don't know who they are. So you've got to remove your name, your school's name. If you work with a professor at a particular college, you've got to remove that name. So anything like that has to be out of there, or I'm going to have to bounce your manuscript back to you and ask you to fix that before I can actually send it out to review. All right, we covered a lot. So if you have any questions about all of this, please type your questions in the chat box.
Hello, everyone. This is Dorothy. I'll wait a moment for you to type questions in the chat box, and I'll check and see if any have been posted. So please do type your questions in the chat box. A question was asked and answered about the release forms, that if you can't see the student faces, like the back, if you're looking at the back of their heads or their hands, and can't answer that. If you can't see the faces, then no model release is needed. I see a comment from Judith that she's happy to hear about what you can do with submissions and pictures and editing. And Ken responded that we can add the polish. They just need your creative ideas. We'll wait another moment for questions. Okay, why don't we move forward and we'll pick up more questions at the end.
So I'm going to briefly take you through the mechanics of the submission process. And as we've mentioned a couple times here, we use something called Manuscript Central. I've posted a link down there in the chat box for you. But this is our online submission and review system, and its purpose is to collect your author information and allow you to submit your manuscript by taking you through a few steps. But the first thing you need to do here is to visit Manuscript Central by clicking on the link or going to that URL and creating a new account. And you'll see the option there at the bottom of the box. When you create an account, it's automatically going to create an author center for you. And while you're doing this process, it's going to ask you, your preferred email address and your mailing address and various other standard contact information sort of things. But once that account is created, the next time you log in, you'll see an author center that you can click on. And from there, you can start the review process. I'm trying to see the little pointer here. Let's see, is it this one? I think that's right. Oh, here we go. I'll just use this arrow, I guess. But it's going to take you through 6 steps. The first step here is, well, we've jumped to step 5, but the first one is getting what type of manuscript. We talked about this earlier, so if you want to submit a feature article, then you do that. If you wanted to submit to one of our specific departments, the list we went through beforehand, the classic lessons or teacher's toolkit, then you can select that from the drop-down list. And again, if you're just unsure, you submit it as a general submission, and Patty will decide where it best fits. Then we're going to collect some attributes about your manuscript. So what keywords do you think best help describe that manuscript? And Patty's going to use those keywords to help pick appropriate reviewers to take a look at. So the reviewers also pick keywords to describe their own areas of expertise, and the Manuscript Central can also then match the manuscript to the appropriate reviewer. Step 3 is collecting information about authors. Again, your contact information and where you work. But it's a pretty straightforward process, and the step here that we've highlighted on the page, the file upload, is going to collect the various pieces that you have. Patty mentioned before, probably a main Word document that has the body of your text, but then you can also choose to upload photographs or charts or figures, all these various pieces. And what it's going to do for you at the end of the process is ask you to review all of everything you submitted as a PDF, or you can even look at it in HTML. But it gives you one last check to look at things to make sure that everything is appearing as you intended and in the proper order. And you can, if you see something you think is out of order, you can change the order of the files that you've submitted and review it again. Anyway, you can tweak it for a while until you decide you've got it just right. And once you do have it just right, you've got a little overview. You can see the manuscript type here. You chose it as to be a feature, and, well, your title you can check as well, and the little abstract that you provided. If you have a theme as well that you think it's a good fit for during the sort of information collecting phase, you'll be able to pick from a list of themes, and there's a link within the system itself so you can see them and type in where you think it fits. And again, if Patty thinks it fits someplace better, she might save it for a different theme. But again, if it's just a general submission, you don't have to worry about picking the theme. Once the manuscript is in the system, everything is email driven. So you'll get a email right away saying you successfully submitted your manuscript, and Patty will get one saying a new manuscript is in the system. Once Patty gets that email, then she'll go into the system, give it a review, look at your keywords, read your abstract. If she has time, she'll go through the manuscript in more detail. And once she has a good sense of what it is has been submitted, she'll assign some reviewers to the manuscript. A minimum of 2 people will look at the manuscript, but sometimes it'll be 3, 4, even 5 people that Patty will assign, especially if she gets sort of vague reviews or people are on the fence as to whether or not to accept or reject or send it back for revision. She might decide to send it out for an extra set of eyes to look at it to kind of be a tiebreaker. The reviewers have a couple weeks to look at your manuscript and fill out their review form. Patty will again be notified by email saying the reviews are in. She'll take a look at it. Hopefully it's a clear-cut decision about what she wants to do with that, with the reviews. And again, I mentioned before, she can decide to either accept the manuscript outright. That happens in very rare cases with a first submission. She can send it back for a minor revision, a major revision, or just reject it outright if it's just not something that's appropriate for our journal. Once the reviews are in, Patty's made the decision, then an email is sent to the author, and it's either saying congratulations, it's been accepted, or please take a look at these reviewer comments that are included and revise your manuscript as indicated. And again, Patty mentioned the things we're looking for as far as assessment, classroom management, safety. If these pieces are missing, these are the kind of things she's going to be asking for you in a revision. So we need all those things to kind of paint that complete picture of your activity. She mentioned it's a double-blind review process. We have 2 reviewers. Could be middle school teachers or college professors or informal science educators. There's all sorts of types that are volunteering to serve on our manuscript panel. So whatever you submit, we will be able to match it up with the right reviewer. The kind of things that they're looked for, and you can actually see the form that the reviewers use by going to that URL listed up here. And that's helpful. You could even ask a friend to kind of fill out the review form themselves if you've had them take a look at your manuscript. But it's the kind of things you'd expect. The accuracy, is it appropriate for the grade level? The classroom management, safety, interesting to read, is there assessment, any inclusion for all types of students, and also, again, Patty stressed the importance of making those connections to the NGSS. We talked about these decisions. Probably 90% of them on the first submission are going to either be a minor revision or a major revision. And it might go through a round or 2 before it finally gets to that phase where Patty's comfortable in accepting it for publication. Reasons for rejection: too narrow of an audience, not tested in the classroom, not 3D NGSS-based instruction, missing numerous details, is a research paper. And if Patty's in a really bad mood, if you have not blinded your manuscript, she might just reject it out of hat there. We mentioned this. Most manuscripts need at least 2 rounds of revisions to get all our answers to our questions. And during the revision process, you'll be receiving those reviewer comments, and manuscripts are archived after 5 months. So if something is rejected, we do have access to it for up to 5 months before it the files are removed from the system. That has more to do with revisions. If you don't act and get your revision in fast enough, then we're going to have you start from scratch and submit that manuscript as something completely new. So once accepted, 12 to 24 months is the honest average time it takes to get your article printed in the journal. I mentioned earlier that if you've applied or have been accepted for a specific theme issue, then it could be much sooner than that. But if it's I guess we're talking about the general submission articles here. If it's something we haven't published, we'll probably get it published in that next calendar year. If it's something that we have just published an article on, it could be 2 years before we get it in because we don't want to repeat ourselves. So that's just want to let you know up front, it does take a while. Once it's been assigned to a lineup, you'll be assigned an editor. They'll work with you to, they'll have their own author queries that they'll want you to answer. They might contact you for the high-res versions of the photos that you submitted. They might want to follow up on any missing photo model releases. But it'll be back and forth through email, and that process is probably from the time we get a lineup from Patty to the time we are sending you a layout of the article for after the design team has worked on it. It's probably 4 to 6 weeks. So we'll be kind of going back and forth during that time, having you fill in some blanks and approving various versions of the edits and the layouts of your manuscript. We are adding more and more multimedia components to accompany not only the online version of your article, but we also have our own YouTube channel that we can post things on. So if you create short videos of maybe the kids in the classroom doing the activity, or it could just be a headshot of you describing your activity that we can use as sort of an introduction. Nothing makes it more authentic than a short video of your kids being energetic and creative in the classroom, and letting everyone see that their classrooms are just as messy as yours. And again, it makes it authentic and relatable. So keep that in mind. In addition to just the still photos, if you want to create a video, we'd love to embed that into the digital edition of the journal as well. Well, I just covered this. We can take it pretty much any type of video file or audio file, slideshows, PowerPoint files. We'll find a way to embed these things, but the important thing is for you to create these things ahead of time so we can kind of branch out and create a more visual presentation of your activity. We use WeTransfer for the larger files. So if you have a longer video and or some massive PowerPoint you want to share with us, or an audio file can even get sort of large even after a few minutes, you can go to WeTransfer and upload that file. And it's very simple. You just use this address down here, sciencescope@nsta.org, put your own email and maybe a little message. You add your files up here and hit transfer, and we found this to be pretty seamless and straightforward. So these types of files are not accepted through Manuscript Central. So any multimedia file should be submitted to us through WeTransfer. And I'm going to catch my breath and grab a drink of water here while we answer any other questions about the mechanics of submitting the manuscript.
Okay, everyone, let's type your questions in the chat box. We'll give you a moment to get those in there. While we're waiting, I had a question. Are the videos that you were just talking about something that would go in the supplemental materials, or would it be a link in the article?
We'll mention that a video is available, and everyone who is a member of NSTA and has access to all 4 of the digital editions of the journals. So they can go online. We'll have put a little embedded play button in the article in an appropriate place, and they can click on that and see the video. We also have something called Online Connections where we can also post the video or a link to it on our YouTube channel. So if they didn't want to access the digital journal but just wanted to see the video, they could just go to the NSTA webpage, pull up the article and or the Online Connections section and view that video. I'll pull up that that link and post it in just a second here.
And we have a comment from Judith that it all seems very author-friendly. It seems we do not have any other questions, so we might as well move forward, and we'll return for questions at the end.
Well, this is our big finish slide. We look forward to receiving your manuscripts, and really we are a member-dependent journal, and actually you don't even have to be a member of NSTA to submit a manuscript. We're just looking for the best ideas to share with our readers, and they come from you. So if you're willing to make the effort, we're willing to work with you, and we have a great team here at NSTA of designers and editors that are going to make you look great. So it's all depends on you and taking the time to take the time to sit down, write up your ideas, and then let us help you, again, add the polish and get you published.
Does anybody have a question about maybe an idea they have for a manuscript that they want to run by us? I say, if not, you have my email and Ken's email, but feel free to reach out to either of us. Ken will probably forward it to me, but if you have a question about an idea, please do not hesitate to email me anytime. I'm on the computer all the time, so I'll probably get back to you within 24 hours or so, but I think your best bet is to read through ScienceScope, get a feel for the kinds of things that we publish and what the tone of the journal is, but again, I'll be happy to take any questions that you have.
Patty, I do see a question. It says, do you accept breakout type of activities?
I'm not sure what you mean by breakout type of activities. Is that professional development activities, or so whoever typed that, if they could maybe explain that?
Judith said, breakout EDU, multiple locks on a box.
Oh, breakout. Okay, yeah, I know what breakout is. Why not? Now, some of those are published online. So I know that I have a breakout box, and I didn't get to it last year, but I was going to have my kids make a game and then put it online. So, yeah, that would be a great integrating technology piece as to how you use that in the classroom to teach kids science content. So, yeah, go ahead and submit it. You'll get reviewer feedback. One of the other tips that I think, I'm not sure we shared with you, was that all of the reviewer questions are online at NSTA. And so when you're writing your article, go through and make sure that you've addressed all those questions. Otherwise, you're going to be hit with a huge laundry list of things to do to revise, and that might get a little overwhelming. So go through and make sure you've included everything that they're going to be looking for. But yeah, I think a breakout would be, we haven't published anything along those lines, so that could be really fascinating. So yes, please write that up. Any other questions?
Okay. Well, I would like to thank our presenters for a job well done, and also thank the audience for their attendance and participation. We will have time at the end to come back for more questions. So thank you to Patty McGinnis and Ken Roberts. We also want to thank NSTA, the National Science Teachers Association, the sponsor of today's web seminar, the National Science Teachers Association, and the NSTA web seminar team for their support for web seminars. This will conclude the program, and I will stop the recording, and then we will please stay for the survey.